Hello. Well, I've been talking to my son Raymond, who used to uh, be in theater down here in Phoenix. He started a company featuring all new plays and proceeded to produce a lot of those plays for 14 years. And then he uh, got into teaching theater at a charter school here, Metro Arts, for 10 years. And then he moved to Utah because he had to have a hip replacement surgery. And he went up there to have it and was spending summers there doing a festival in Boulder, Utah, my hometown, with two of his cousins. So he's been up there ever since, and he's now on his third hip replacement to come. So that is scheduled for April. But anyway, he talked to me about a project that he and his partner, Kurt, from New York, I know, and has been involved with Raymond, directing plays, his plays, and others, for years. Anyway, they are talking about making a documentary using excerpts from my videos, and Raymond wanted to know if I was amenable to that idea. And I thought about it and what he said, and I believe that I told him, well, the videos are just sitting there. Yes, I will go along with someone trying to do something with them. For the most part, they're, this I think wouldn't hurt to try something like this. And I'll tell you why I think it would be a good idea. I have a history that is somewhat unique, but it is very hard for people to accept this kind of history. Now, my sister, she just told me that if I didn't make my videos so long, she thought they would do a lot better. And I said, well, and I'll tell her, and you at the same time, the subject matter is what causes me to have to make long videos. I actually spent 50 years, more than 50 years, trying to prepare my family to even hear what happened to me at 5 years old, and the fact that I found out at that time that my father was undoubtedly, to me, involved with the molester. Because my father was standing right there while he more or less told me this. And I think my father hoped that I wouldn't understand what he was saying, which, by the way, he said something very obscene, the most obscene thing I've ever heard. Although, when my sister asked me what it was, I said, well, I don't remember. I just remember that it was very obscene. And I'm sure my father really hoped that I didn't understand it. My little sister was running around there, and she didn't pay any attention to it because she was too young. But I had apparently learned to listen to adults quite closely. And so I heard it, and I was shocked, terribly shocked. In fact, when this same man molested me a few weeks later, I was almost as upset at what of my father being involved with him as I was at the molesting. And it made it so difficult for me to tell that I just couldn't picture myself telling my mother. because I felt that I would have to tell her about the other, which was infidelity, and I knew would upset her very much. I just couldn't see myself telling her this, or telling, so I thought, well, I've got to prepare them. I've got to, how do you tell somebody something like that? I mean, I had tried to understand what this had turned my father into. But he was a bisexual, as I came to conclude after I realized that's what a bisexual was. He had sexual relations with women and men. And oh, so I think as the years went by, well, maybe they're ready now. No, they had to be talked to some more. Talked to some more. No. And so now say take my the video that has the most hits on it of mine, 30,000 hits. It's called something about how I cured my sexual addiction at 80. Well, what my sexual, now the video itself is a long video about all kinds of other things that don't even deal with that. Before I felt that I was going to have to tell people what the addiction was after building up, saying this, saying that, and then I finally told them, and what my addiction was after being molested at 5 by this man, and also somewhat by a 7-year-old cousin. And now this 7-year-old cousin came in around about the same and said he wanted to play mom and dad in the granary. So we went in the granary, and I found out playing mom and dad was getting in bed and him getting on top of me, and that was, well, his mother came down to the granary and caught us, and she took him by the ear, and he wasn't allowed to come over there again for a long time. And I found out that, but anyway, before he did do that, why he said, oh, and I've got a great fun thing to do. He'd learned how to masturbate on the fence. And since by then I had been molested, I, being a smart little girl, soon learned very fast how to masturbate with him instructing me. And having that other disturbing experience, it wasn't long until I was masturbating on a regular basis. And I thought, oh, if my family ever finds out about this, they're going to think I'm the worst thing that ever was. I'm sure going to hell. But I just wasn't able to stop that easy. And so I'm talking about this in this video after I had gone around and around and around the subject, and finally just spit it out. Well, and anyway, at the time that I was talking about this, I had managed to stop masturbating, probably for the first time in my life, for months. So I made the well, I'm not even going to go into this. I'm not ready, but you see, I came out with one of the results of being molested very young by my 7-year-old cousin and by a grown man, 45 years old, around about the same time. And I spent 50 years, over 50 years, trying to get my family built up to where I could tell them about this. And I done a lot of talking over those years. I had talked about this. And they still weren't ready to hear it. My mother absolutely denied that this could be so, and she ordered me not to say anybody that. And I said, well, I'm sorry, Mother, I'm tired of keeping this secret. I'm going to tell anyway. I've already started. You can't stop me. And, but my sisters, they didn't buy it either. They said, we don't see Daddy like that, was one of the things they said. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I do see it that way, because they were together. They're going in the cabin, staying for an hour. I thought it all fit. So this was true. And you didn't get molested by this guy, so you know, that sort of thing might not be real to you. So you see, when people aren't molested, they just can hardly bridge that to that realization is what happens to the children that are. So, and I played with little kids that had been molested. I knew they had by their uncle. And the first thing they want to do is play mom and dad and go in on the... Well, it was shocking sometimes for me to tell people this. My conventional friends who were innocent, who never had such terrible experiences, I would now run the risk of losing them because of my experience. Even though it wasn't my fault, just talking about it was enough. So, but anyway, I think that if they're brave enough to excerpt some of my videos on such subjects and make a documentary, well, I'll have to be brave enough to let them, even though people might not even speak to me after they realize some of the stuff that I had to fight after being molested, acting out, influencing other little kids. And finally, in order to stop myself from acting out with someone, I said, well, let's kneel down and pray. We'll never do that again. And so we kneeled down and prayed. Well, I was surprised that eventually, around 8 years old, this worked. And I was actually able to stop sexually acting out with other kids. But I was not able to stop, masturbating. So, if you're honest about what you actually did, it's highly risky. It can get you sort of avoided, shunned. No, there's just a big price to pay. And I think all victims know about this price. I mean, you get contaminated by the behavior. And you have a very hard time not turning into a little molester yourself. So this kind of thing in my videos could be illuminating, interesting. But if my son and his partner are brave enough to excerpt videos like that, far be it from me to discourage them. I say, okay, See what you can come up with.